Uh, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to reflection number 5. I think it's number 5. I'm hoping it's number 5. Reflection number 5 on chapter 5 of Dugan. So this chapter is entitled Theories of Production and Effectiveness. So let me make a general comment about the title. I think it situates the entire chapter. This is a good title. Theories of Production and Effectiveness. Why do I call that a good title? Well, this is about leadership. This chapter is about leadership in the context of work, industrial work in particular, in the context of supervisor and supervisees. So the leadership theories that he discusses in this chapter are all placed in that context. And though he never says it, not that I'm aware of anyhow, I would say it. These are the styles of leadership we live with every day, right? Most of us work, and we work in organizations that have some form of hierarchy, some form of distributed power under the hierarchy. And therefore, most of us are, in one way or another, supervised. So we are either the supervisors or the supervisees. Some of us have been at both ends of that continuum. And some of you, I know, I've talked to a few of you, some of you are supervisors or are currently being supervised. So when you look around the world, you should be able to see traces of each of these different approaches to leadership, because I think, in a sense, they're the most common approaches in the entire domain, in the entire gallery of leadership theories. These theories, I think, are the most visible. Perhaps I should limit that to my own experience. In my experience, theories of production and effectiveness are the theories that I have had to live and breathe and suffer under. So I feel a certain a certain familiarity with these theories. Now, that said, it's very interesting that Dugan has written this chapter on these theories, and it's quite clear, I think, that Dugan considers these theories to be not altogether useful. Maybe I can put it that way. He uses the term zombie theories, and I find it a little bit interesting that after covering the three theories, and the three theories I may as well mention now, you have style theory, often called behavioral theory. You have situational leadership. Dugan has almost nothing good to say about that. And there are reasons, we'll talk about it. And path goal. I think path goal is a very common type of leadership style in the real world. So we will talk about these three in turn. We'll look at some of the criticisms that Dugan offers. And before doing so, before we start with the first theory, with style theory, what I'd like to do is go backwards, back to the last reflection, and talk about reliability. Now, why? I mentioned reliability, and I wasn't quite certain I got it right. Well, I think I did get it right. If you think of a dartboard and you're throwing darts, and each dart is a theory, if, let us suppose, you hit the bullseye 5 times in a row, that's a valid theory, right? Because it's measuring what it's supposed to measure. It's describing what it's supposed to describe. It is theorizing about what it's supposed to theorize. So in that case, given that all of the darts are in the bullseye, we would say, well, that's a valid theory. It's accurate. It hits the target. Now, it's also a reliable theory because each separate throwing of the dart lands right next to the other darts, right? So they're clustered closely together. And where you see that, you have a theory that's not only valid, you have a theory that's reliable. I mentioned yesterday, reliability is the attainment of similar results under similar test conditions. So a theory is reliable if it generates similar results in similar cases. So I just wanted to clarify that term. I suspect that in your course, and I think you did research methods with Professor Lepore, if I'm not mistaken. I would think, in fact, I would guess that you have covered those sorts of theoretical terms, validity, reliability. When we look at theories and we attempt to critique them, these are familiar categories of critique, right? So is your theory valid? Does it describe what it's supposed to? Is it reliable? Does it generate similar results over time given similar conditions? So that said, I want to turn to the first leadership theory that Dugan discusses here, which he calls style theory. Style theory, he has a number of things to say about it. He does say that all of these theories, as I mentioned, deal with management. Now, this takes us for the first time to the concept of management, and we will struggle with this concept throughout the course. Management is related to leadership. And certain scholars think it's just, if you will, a branch of management. I'm not inclined to think that way, but I try to keep an open mind. I'm thinking of people like Peter Drucker, the great management theorist. Drucker recognized a distinction between management and leadership, but felt that leadership was a branch of management. So he's an example of a major theorist who would not have separated leadership from management. So management is, as I mentioned before, I think management involves control. Now, again, I don't want to suggest rather that term has to be pejorative. We at times need to exercise control over different types of variables, people, things, situations, etc. So I think we have to resist an almost natural inclination to regard control as a bad thing. So management is about control, and management, I would suggest to you, has its own limits. And when you start bumping into those limits, you often have to step over them into a different world, into the world of leadership. So I don't want to go too far with that. We'll build that conception of leadership as we go through the course. Now, I wanted to call your attention to the grid, the leadership grid on 5.1, because I think it suggests and indicates, and to a degree describes, certain common forms of leadership. So the leadership grid is on 120. If you look at it, it has, and I used to talk about this years ago, with my colleagues. It has these 5 different forms of leadership on a grid. You can take a look at the grid. It's pretty simple. What I wanted to say about it is it does describe real realities in the world. Country club management, I've seen it. I suspect you've seen it. Authority compliance, I've seen it. I suspect you've seen it. So we're now entering a world that we should recognize, right? And that's how I open this session today. So if you look at person-centered theories of leadership, which we did in chapter 4, you often don't find people in that world. There's not a lot of relationships. There's not a connection to others, which, if you think about it, is pretty odd when you start talking about leadership. If people disappear, you know you have a bit of a problem. So at least here we have people. So he talks about task and task behaviors and relational behaviors. So the idea of relating to others is built into these different theories. The case of production, it should be obvious. In the case of production, you're bringing people together to produce. This was something that was remarked upon by sociologists in the 19th century with the rise of industrialism. What did industrialism do? It's important to keep in mind. It took people who were isolated, separate, and brought them together. That at a high level too, right? This was a social phenomenon. So the industrial period has direct social consequences, one of which, indeed perhaps the primary outcome, was the bringing together of millions of people into the process of industrial production. It's very hard for us to understand that because we're so distanced from it. But this was an extraordinary transformation of Western society, to focus on our side of the world. It's hard for us to keep that in mind because we've grown up with it. It's easy for us to overlook it. But industrialization means socialization of the workforce. So it had a direct impact on, first, the business of management, the discipline of management, because if you bring all of these people together, you have the problem of control, right? How do you manage these people? So management becomes a serious type of professional discipline with the rise of the industrial age. And as management collides with the reality of people and machines and process, leadership begins to emerge as a set of skills or talents, traits. We're not making any determinations here, competencies. These different types of competencies begin to emerge. Why? This is a theory of mine. Why? Because management can only control so much. There's only so much space for control. Let me give you an example of what I mean. And I know I'm speaking over the theories here, but I think part of the reason why leadership emerges in the industrial period, a bit later, it's hard to do the chronology, but later in the industrial period, it arises And I've always thought, and this again is just a guess of mine, but I've always thought that part of the reason for this is if you focus on productivity, there are two ways of enhancing productivity. If you talk to an economist, one is you buy machines, right? So you get greater output per hour and hence greater productivity. So machines have been pivotal to increases of productivity over time. And I think anyone would tell you that. But the other way of increasing effectiveness and productivity is to engage people, to motivate them. So an engaged workforce will, other things being equal, it will produce more per hour, and it will produce more hours, right? People will give more. Now, the theory is, there are various theories, but one way of approaching them as a whole, is to say that engagement enhances productivity, but engagement requires a set of skills above and beyond management, because engagement is not about control. Engagement is about motivation. Now, you will see in this chapter, he goes to motivation over and over again. He starts, Dugan, in reflecting on these theories, Dugan goes again and again to the issue of motivation. Motivation becomes important in the industrial context for the reason I just gave you. It's not just about the machines, it's about the people too. And let me say one more thing at a general level before going to the theory. Most people, I would argue most managers, it's almost a prejudice of management. They look at organizations and they see them as machines. That is to say, they see the organization as a set of processes that exist on their own, can be enacted or put in place, and they run on their own. And if you provide direction and you provide the appropriate support, you will achieve the outcomes you desire. And this is more or less a matter of lining up people, resources, and management, and line them up in the direction of a specific goal. And now I'm talking about the path goal leadership. But I think that's the dominant model in this chapter, by the way. And it is, if you will, inside bureaucracies. It is the dominant mode of, if we want to call it leadership, I'm not sure Dugan does. If we want to call it leadership, that would be the dominant mode of leadership, is path goal. In other words, if you work in a bureaucracy, you will be told, here's the goal, I'm a leader, here's the path. Oh, is this in your way? I'll move this out of your way. Is that in your way? I'll move that out of your way. But my job is to set out the path that you need to take to accomplish the goal. In addition, I support you along the way. There are problems, I help you out. I provide direction. I provide support. I might even collaborate, right? So this is, I think, the dominant model of management / leadership in most public bureaucracies, for example. So just with that said, I'll now turn to the theories. I'm not going to say a lot about the theories. To be honest, I'm surprised. I should say, I'm very surprised at Dugan, because I'm not sure I understand why he wrote this chapter. He doesn't have much to say about these theories that I would regard as optimistic. He in fact says about the first case, style theory, he says, and you should look at the table on 5.2, because it will give some substance to the leadership styles that he's talking about. I love the country club style, and I work for someone who practiced that style of leadership, the country club style. Take a look at 5.2 though, because it spells out some of the different forms of leadership that fall out of, or motivational factors, I should say, associated with certain leadership styles. I was just saying, this chapter goes to motivation. It goes to motivation because there are people around and the leader is relating to those people. So that said, let me turn, as I don't want to take up too much time, to the strengths and weaknesses on 125. He has almost nothing good to say about it. It has very little empirical support. Workers are viewed as a commodity. I thought that was interesting. Workers are indeed viewed as a commodity, and that should be clear. You sell your labor, people buy your labor. Your labor is a commodity. It's not much more complicated than that. So strengths and weaknesses, I won't go into that. Situational leadership, to be honest, it turning to that conception of leadership, it's very, to be honest, very sloppy. And Dugan goes into this. The parts don't fit well together. It's not clear how many parts there are. It's a theory almost by grace of language. It isn't what I would describe as a bona fide coherent theory. And Dugan picks up on that, and he goes after it for that reason. Again, here, leaders become supportive. They can be directive. They're surrounded by people. There's a context of some kind, in this case, the industrial context. It's not a theory that offers a lot, or rather, it offers so much we can't sort out what it's saying. That might be a better description of what Dugan says. On 127, he says, shifting labels across versions of situational leadership lack detailed explanations, making it difficult to track content and arguments. That's what I'm saying. So take a look at the theory. There's a useful, I think, picture of it in figure 5.2. So if you take a look at this, you can see high directive, high supportive. Well, that's up in the right quadrant. That's good. Then you have at the lower right quadrant, high directive and low supportive behavior. Well, there's a lot of directing going on there. It's implied to a degree, I think, that this is not good. This is not good leadership. You see the term coaching in there. We will talk about coaching at some point. Coaching is, I think, a very important leadership tool for individual leaders. It's not clear it works for groups, but we'll talk about that later. There are professional coaches in the world. I'm not talking about coaches of sports teams. I'm talking about professional coaches who sit with executives or managers and coach them. Coaching is a fascinating relationship. Why? I might deviate just a little bit here. It might help. You know what a mentor is? A mentor is someone who knows something better than you do, who helps you learn it. Mentors can be younger, older. Mentors can come from anywhere. So that's what a mentor is. There's a presumed expertise that you're imparting to the mentee. Whereas in coaching, the coach often does not have the expertise of the coachee. The coachee is an expert, athlete, scientist, community development worker, what have you. The coach often does not have the expertise, is not an expert. What the coach does in professional coaching, you first of all coach to an objective, but what the coach does is the coach opens you up from the inside. I'll leave it there for now. It's a fascinating discipline. And there's an effort nowadays to make leaders coaches. And I'm not sure that works because coaching requires a certain set of talents, and not everyone has them. I know I don't have them, for example. So I'm sorry about that digression on coaching. So let's take a look at his comments, the strengths and weaknesses on situational leadership. There are all sorts of weaknesses, which is why I had to laugh when I read this chapter, because he presents the theories, but he then tells us, well, they're almost not worth considering. That's a rather odd thing to do, but in any case, they are worth considering. And I think they're still in our world. These theories are visible in our world. So the idea that they're zombies, that's not altogether correct. They have far too much kick to be zombies. I think they're half zombies or some such thing. Now, I want to go to path goal theory. I know this hasn't been a great reflection. I've been jumping around a lot. I'm not sure any of them are great, but in any case, here I am, house. Now, I'm going to quote Dugan because I think this is a good formulation. The central proposition of path goal theory is that leaders must engage in behaviors that complement subordinates' environments and abilities in a manner that compensates for deficiencies and is instrumental to subordinate satisfaction and performance. By the way, this is often referred to, all of these theories have a kind of instrumental character to them. Leadership is an instrument used to advance productivity and effectiveness. So you could refer to these three theories as instrumental theories. That might help you position it. Now, again, to cite Dugan, helpfully, I think, the effective leader must enact behaviors that create pathways linking subordinate effort to goal attainment. Right. There's a figure 5.3 that makes this clear. So what do? I provide direction. My subordinates move under that direction forward. Something blocks them, I move it out of the way, or they need special equipment, or may need to develop new skills. I assist them in that, and they move forward. But my goal throughout is to drive them towards the outcome desired. So this is where the machine metaphor can emerge. You think, well, I have various units of labor, and I have a goal, and I'm going to coordinate those units of labor. I'm going to align them. I'm going to then give them direction, and I'm going to press a button that says go. Now, that conception of the organization is, believe it or not, I think the dominant conception that we carry around in our heads. So you've heard of the complex adaptive system. That's a rival notion, as I think you're aware. However, that notion is not in the heads of an awful lot of managers. It's not. It's not in the head of many managers. It's much easier simply to look at the organization as a machine. You give it some direction, you give it some output, you get the snags out of the way, and you get the outputs you want. So input, output. What stands between the input and the output? People. What are they? Units of labor, right? So you strip them of their humanity, their social nature, their emotions, their personhood, and you treat them as units of labor. So this, in the extreme case, right, can be seen in, for instance, the demonic dark mills of the 19th century. I referred to them in another reflection, children working under spindle machines. Well, what was that all about? That was about treating the organization as a machine. People were just appendages to the machine, but the machine had to keep running. So that metaphor follows us from the industrial age into what we're calling the post-industrial age. I'm a bit skeptical about that term. So anyhow, path theory, I think, is not a zombie theory. I'm going to challenge Dugan there. I don't think this is a zombie theory. I think this theory is very much alive and walking around the world. And you can bump into it at just about any time. We should remember, and he talks about this. He does. He talks about how you can sell leadership. Well, look, leadership is sold all of the time. It's like a pill. Here, take this. You'll be a great leader. It's absurd, but it's very common. And I would say, too, that the leadership literature, an awful lot of it, is not academic literature, not in the true sense of the term. It's not written by people with degrees who are studying in academic disciplines. It's written by people who work in the private sector for the most part. It's executive literature. It's the great man theory, or the great woman theory. We've grown a little bit. So we now have great women and great men, and soon, I suspect, we'll have great other individuals, right? It's this idea that there's something out there, and once you find it, if you can find it, it will make you a great leader. It reminds me of our approach to health to a degree. I mentioned that I worked in health. What do? We take medicines. Do we keep our health up? Do we go to a gym? Do we run? Do we take care of our bodies? No need. Why? Well, if I get heavy, I'm just going to take a pill and, shave off the pounds. So we look at our own bodies as machines too. So it's, I think, interesting. In the case of our bodies, we're told, oh, what you need is this. Take this concoction, take this remedy, swallow this pill, and everything will be fine. That's rarely the case. But moreover, I bring it up because it's very common in the field of leadership to have people selling things. Let's call it what it is. It's the commodification of leadership. That's exactly what it is. That's why I challenged Dugan on commodification. I don't think he gets that right. What he's talking about in here is the commodification of leadership. The fact that you can buy it and sell it, package it and say, you know what, at GE, Jack Welch, the CEO, this is what he did. And GE, its earnings went through the roof. And then, of course, the inference is made, not properly, by the way, but the inference is made that the outcome, the increase in revenue, is a result of the leadership of Jack Welch, right? Those inferences are made all of the time in the I'm going to call it professional literature, not academic literature. As I said in another reflection, if you want to see this, go to any major bookstore and just look at management and leadership, and you'll see all of these exalted figures who claim to be, have somehow grabbed the very essence of leadership. Now, let me go to, I know I'm kind of speaking over these theories. Let me go to 5.5, which is strengths and weaknesses of path goal theory. Now, unable to be substantiated by empirical research. Think about what that means. That means there's very little evidence to support it. That's what it means. And he says the same thing about situational leadership, right? It too lacks empirical support. Well, look at this. The style leadership, right? The style theory, it also lacks empirical support. So in Dugan's view, not one of these theories is empirically valid. Maybe we can put it that way, right? Or empirically sound. So, so much for these theories. He has, and I wanted to draw your attention to it. Oh, the zombie references on 144. He may refer to it earlier. I don't understand. Here we go. I've mentioned this before, but the business about reconstruction, we can just go with the flow. But it's odd to say, oh, it's a zombie theory, but you know what? I'm going to reconstruct the zombie theory and save the zombies. Why would you save? Why are you saving zombies? Anyhow, it's quite clear that Dugan, just to summarize, Dugan doesn't think any of these theories is a valid leadership theory. He doesn't have a very high opinion of them. And I think it's a bit of a, I hesitate to call it a mistake. That sounds too judgmental. But I think he's leaving something out there. And it may be that he still thinks, or he thinks, I should say, that this is a post-industrial world, that we've somehow moved beyond the industrial context. And again, while I would admit that, yes, we shifted industry to Asia, there's still industry in North America, I know, but there's not nearly as much if we're looking at manufacturing. So what is my point? My point is, although we don't have as much manufacturing in our lives as we used to, and these three leadership styles move out of the world of manufacturing, they're appropriate to the world of manufacturing. The fact that manufacturing has declined does not, I don't think we can infer from that this model, in particular, the path goal leadership conception, we cannot infer that it also has been shipped overseas. I don't think it has been shipped overseas. I think I've seen it in just about every workplace I've been in. That is to say, if my manager even sees him or herself as a leader, he or she will see herself or himself in that way because they're envisioning goals, they're providing direction to the goals, a path, and they're equipping you to achieve the goal, to move down the path to achieve the goal. Their role as leaders will be to equip you, provide you with the competencies and skills, and remove any obstacles in your way. That, I would argue, is a very common practical conception of leadership, quite visible in our world, even though the industrial context has moved on. Right? It's like colonialism. You know, the colonizers are gone. Yeah, they're gone, but coloniality remains. That type of thinking remains, right? So that's how I would approach this. Now, I hope this has been a helpful review of this section. I really didn't say a lot about it, about the theories, and I think I might be influenced by Dugan there. I tend to follow, I tend to understand why he's saying what he does about these three theories. They're not well put together, and I'm not even certain that a situation leadership merits the term theory. But that said, please take a look. And again, if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, anything of that kind, please let me know. Thank you. I'll see you this afternoon, by the way. Well, bye for now.